The Academy Awards, a night full of glitz, glam, the best there is in the entertainment industry. A night where all actors, producers, writers, and people that have worked hard for the entire year get to celebrate this one amazing night. For the past for the past 7 years, I've hosted this show, 4 of which with a good friend of mine named Andrew. The last 3 I've done by myself, and now, as you can see, I brought in some reinforcements. Welcome this year, my co-hosts for the 8th annual Academy Awards special of Eric's View, and starting to, well, my left, your right, Mr. Charlie Sullivan.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Mr. Gary Bradley.
Hi, to my 3 kids, Tiberius, Scafurius, and Tim. Time to go to bed, sweetie. Mommy loves you.
To my right, your left, Miss Melanie Randall.
Hello.
And right, and last but not least, Mr. Keith Gregory Taylor.
Hi, Eric. First-time caller.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here tonight and all that. It means a lot to me.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to dive right into the very first topic of the evening. As we've seen in most Oscar shows, with the exception of a few, there is an MC, somebody who gets the whole show together, an occasional few jokes like Bob Hope once said, the Oscars are what they call my house Passover. But this coming year, unfortunately, there is not going to be a host for the first time in 30 years. Your thoughts on this moment in time?
I'm a little disappointed. I've heard from my panelists that they are not such big fans of having hosts. However, back when Whoopi Goldberg and Bruce Vilanch were writing for it and Billy Crystal was hosting, it was fantastic. Like, I still watch those clips on YouTube today. So to not have anyone sort of guiding the train, or at least, a comic relief that we know is going to be solid at some point during the show, instead of just the announcer saying, this one won for that thing, and here we go next. I think it's going to be a little boring, honestly.
Yeah, but isn't that's sort of what's been happening lately? The last, who was the host? The last 2 hosts, Andy Samberg and
Sandra
Sandra
Oh.
For the Golden
the
Globes.
most boring hosts I've ever seen on television. But that's also because I think we're post-comedy. People are afraid to make the kind of remarks that Ricky Gervais was making a couple of years ago. They feel very constrained. I mean, that objectively was awful. So if you're going to, like, those 2, if it was going to be them hosting, I'd rather not have a host. I'd like to have a host if it's going to be Billy Crystal and, doing the movie parodies and somebody with a little knowledge and some comic sense and a sense of timing. But if it's just somebody else to stand there and make congratulatory statements to a bunch of stars, you can do without it.
I was going to say I'm actually pretty excited because I've never seen one without a host. And yeah, as you guys are saying, it's not really working out very well as it's going now. So maybe trying something new is not a bad idea. It might not work, but at least we'll find out after this award show.
I also think they were scrambling. They had a co-host with Kevin Hart. I think they just announced today, right, Eric? Today it was like it's official. There's no host. Yeah. To ask somebody to come in with like 3 weeks to spare, I would rather trying something new, like Melanie said, than some kind of half-baked approach with a star who isn't as prepared as they normally should be.
Hey, Academy, I got nothing going on that night. I'm just saying, why not? Granted, I'm a nobody, and I'm not exactly as famous as most of the people in that room or don't have their money, but still, I think I could probably do as well of a job as Kevin Hart. Maybe. But, I think, this is definitely a departure from what we've seen the last 30 years, especially Billy Crystal when he came out with the Hannibal Lecter costume, or Whoopi Goldberg as Queen Elizabeth. I'm going to miss those type of entrances, but my least favorite, and this is not going to sound great, James Franco and Anne Hathaway, probably the absolute god-awful worst co-host ever to do the Oscars.
I remember that.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah,
it was disrespectful. It really was disrespectful.
Disrespectful.
Like, great actors, terrible MCs. But now...
Are they?
I love them.
Yeah.
I'm a Anne Hathaway fan, sure. Ella Enchanted, represent. But...
Of course.
I don't know. We're not here to debate actors.
Or
Thank goodness.
That's not
Well,
yet.
not those actors, at least.
Well, speaking of actors, as we've seen in the film industry, we've seen such diverse cast that happened in films this past year. Crazy Rich Asians. We've also seen Black Panther. It's really been remarkable for Hollywood that we're seeing more of this happening. I think this is definitely a great step in the right direction, and especially I like Ryan Coogler and even Jordan Peele in us. So what are your thoughts on all this that's taking place?
Well, I think actually, Charles, you had a really good point at the meeting over the weekend.
Yes.
What was that?
Well, Charles was saying, it's great that these movies happen, and to add on to that, it seems every time, there's a Crazy Rich Asians, or last year Pixar did Coco, and it was this huge, colossal hit in America and overseas, in countries like Mexico. And every year this happens, there's a movie with a diverse cast, something out of the ordinary, and the headlines are like, surprise hit. But to me, it's not really a surprise that people want to go to the movie theaters and see themselves represented. So, these, flash in the pans are great, but I think there needs to be more steps.
Yeah, the change isn't in the audience appetite for it. The appetite has always been there. The change is in who's making the films and who's writing them, who's producing them. It's a much different world. Spike Lee was just on last night with Stephen Colbert, and he was saying that even the makeup of the Academy has changed appreciably. He said, I love the fact that I'm getting nominated and that Black Klansman got nominated. He said it just wasn't going to happen because there were no black representation in the Academy. There was no minority representation. There was barely women representation because it was an all-male business, all-white, all-male business for the first 80, 90 years. He said things are changing, and part of why you see a Black Klansman, why you see a Black Panther, why you see Crazy Rich Asians, why you see those kind of films is there's now black producers, there's black directors who are being hired by black producers, and there's a much more representation on the other side of the camera, which I think is really driving this.
And I think even Cheryl Boone Isaacs, who's the first African-American woman to be the president of the Academy, too, is definitely a good point as well. What do you guys...
My only issue with all of this is that we can only list a handful of movies. Like, I wish we could just rattle off all of these different diverse movies to talk about, because Black Panther was excellent, Crazy Rich Asians is great, but that's what we've got so far to talk about, and want
Roma, I guess,
right,
fits in,
and Roma, yeah, sure. But yeah, I want more. Like, I want even more things to represent.
Right. What it goes along with what Gary is saying is that it should be the norm instead of a special event. That there's a cast with people who reflect what America looks like now.
All right.
Absolutely.
I think Jordan Peele. I was just doing my homework. Jordan Peele. I think he was an executive producer on Black Klansman.
Yeah.
By him doing that, he is already the individual black producer with the most Best Picture nominations, and he only has two. So he holds the record, and he has two. And his career is just starting. So I think we're in the right direction, but I would like to see. Let's improve. Let's see where we are in 5 years.
Absolutely.
I think, it's definitely a great turn for the industry. I'm loving this, and I want, like you said, Melanie, we want to see more, and I think that's the direction it's going.
And it's also good films.
Yes.
Yes.
If they were terrible films, then we'd be kind of like, oh, it's a good idea, but let's get better. These are top quality films.
Yeah.
And box office hits.
All of them.
Let's talk turkey. That's really why it's going to keep the trend going.
That's
is
what's gonna
that
change.
people will see that there's money to be made as well.
Black Panther domestically made more money than Avengers: Infinity War.
Right.
Amazing.
$1.5 billion, I believe, in domestic gross box office receipts, or even.
I don't know if it cracked $1 billion domestically, but it was
half a billion domestically.
More than $500,000. More than half. Yeah, easily. 600, I think.
All right. Now we're gonna get into the first of the awards, because we got 8 awards for you on the show. Let's start off with Best Original Screenplay, and the nominees for Best Original Screenplay are Deborah Davis and Tony McNamara for The Favorite, Paul Schrader for First Reform, Nick Vallelonga, Brian Curry, and Peter Farrelly for Green Book, Alfonso Cuarón for Roma, and Adam McKay for Vice. Who walks home with the Original Screenplay Award?
I'm going with The Favorite. I absolutely loved that movie. I thought everything about it was great. The casting was amazing. It looked great. And I know I mentioned this, but you guys haven't heard it. I think it's so wonderful in a world where you really can't do anything new anymore. Like, every idea has kind of already been done. So the fact that they took this one moment in history where all we really know is that Queen Elizabeth's right hand was replaced out of nowhere with her cousin, and they created this entire story around it, and they made up exactly how this would have worked if this had been the situation. And I think that's great because it's still historical. It is fiction because we don't know that's what happened, but they just took one little instance and they made an entire film out of it, and it was phenomenal. I love that.
I think definitely tone-wise, it's really fresh, especially a lot of like these prestige period costume dramas, especially if it's a woman like central thing. It's always about like, oh, I'm a woman, poor me in this society. Like I went to go see Mary Queen of Scots expecting the opposite. That's exactly what I got, that these two powerful women are being undermined by men. And this was fresh, it was different, it was funny.
Yeah, it was really funny.
And
I just saw Roma recently, and I really liked the script a lot. The film is also quite beautiful and it's well directed, but the script is Cuarón takes the story of his own life during a very turbulent time in Mexico, and tells it from the point of view of the woman who raised him, who was a nanny, maid, servant, a Oaxacan young woman who was living with the family at the time. And it's just really interesting storytelling for him to tell his life story through her eyes. And in particular, how the fact that the story gets told only in the snatches of things that the maid hears as she's going around her duty. So there's trouble with the marriage, but she hears it only because there's a closed-door telephone conversation as she's cleaning up and things like that. And the politics and the events of the world that are happening are all peripheral and seen through her eyes. I thought that was really interesting storytelling.
Oh, wow.
I don't
know. See it, honestly.
Yeah, right. I was like,
You haven't?
I have not seen Roma yet.
It's an extraordinary film.
I heard it was boring as dirt.
That's true.
And there are many people feel that way,
I
but
mean,
we'll get
to it.
into it. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm going with Green Book, actually. I think it was just such a fresh take on a story that we've seen hundreds of times, and it was just perfectly plotted. And I really was engaged the entire time. And, only because the Oscars love a good inspired by a true story. I think, whether or not I think it's the best, I think it's going to win.
Well, that was probably true until the scandals started coming out about how the story isn't really true to the real story,
but that's true of every inspired by a true story.
I know. There seems to be an awful lot. There seems to be a campaign going to make sure that doesn't win because of that.
By the writers of The Favorite, I'm sure.
Well, I'm going to go with The Favorite. The reason I like this spine-tingling royal mess because it's a great cat and mouse game between Abigail and Lady Sarah the entire time, trying for Queen Anne, the hot-tempered, ill-mannered, and sometimes insane queen, but loves the power play that these two are playing with each other. That's the entire film. That's what's really about. While in the backdrop you have a war with France and taxes that need to be paid on lands, but you still have this intriguing cat and mouse game that captivates you from beginning to end, and you're wondering where is this gonna go. So definitely something to watch if you have an opportunity to. And Yorgos Lanthimos is probably one of the strangest directors. I remember The Lobster with Colin Farrell.
Oh,
that's him.
Yeah.
I love that movie. That was a really kooky one.
And what's the other one? The Sacred Killing of a Deer.
The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Right.
Something about deers and sacred.
The next category, Best Adapted Screenplay. The nominees are The Ballad of Buster Scruggs by Joel and Ethan Coen, based on 4 of the 6 short stories by Joel and Ethan Coen. Old Gold Canyon by Jack London, and The Gavel Got Rattled by Stuart Edward White. Black Klansman, Charlie Wachtel, David Rabinowitz, Spike Lee, and Kevin Wilmot, based on the memoir Black Klansman by Ron Stallworth. Can You Ever Forgive Me? Nicole Holofcener and Jeff Woody, based on the memoir Can You Ever Forgive Me by Lee Israel. If Beale Street Could Talk by Barry Jenkins, based on the novel If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. And A Star Is Born, Eric Roth, Bradley Cooper, and Will Fetters, based on the 1954 screenplay by Moss Hart, the 76 screenplay by Joan Didion, John Gregory Dunne, and Frank Pearson, and the story by Robert Carson and William Wellman. That is a bit of a mouthful.
That was a lot.
Moss Hart wrote the 1954 version?
Yep.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Isn't that amazing that this is the, third or fourth adaptation of A Star is Born, and the fourth one.
There's
and
actually one that predates the 54, but it was roughly based on another film.
38?
38, yeah.
But who will take this prize on Oscar night?
This is a tough one.
That is really tough.
So, did anyone see The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, or am I
I did
alone in
not.
the universe?
I-
Of course you did.
It is a Netflix original story. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I was just repeating what Gary said.
It is a Netflix original story about the American frontier. Each story has sort of a moral story to it. There's one about a gun-toting, very gun-toting man named Buster Scruggs, who is very articulate while shooting people and can shoot anything from 20 miles away dead center. Then you have a story about an acting troupe, which we can all relate to acting since we're all in the Staten Island community theater world, but we're not exactly relatable to this particular actor in the movie where he's being used for coin while at one point he can't. When you watch the film, you'll know what I'm talking about, and you'll kind of be sad for this guy. And if you've seen the Harry Potter films, you'll recognize him easily. And it's just each story has that center, I guess.
So 6 short stories, but only 2 of them are based on pre-existing works. One of them by Jack London, I believe you have it written down here.
Yeah.
So it's kind
and
of
the other one by
more
Stuart
like
Edward
an
Wundt.
original screenplay.
Yeah, to me it fits original. I understand why it can't be nominated for original because some of it is based on pre-existing, but only 1/3 of it is. It's a great movie, and the Coen brothers always write great scripts, even if their movie isn't one of their best. But to me, that just knocks it right out because I feel like it doesn't fit the description. For my money's worth, I'm so annoyed that it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but If Beale Street Could Talk, I think it always helps for a director to be hands-on with the script, and Barry Jenkins really took the source material of James Baldwin and really made it something special. Like, I love The Moonlight, but to be honest, I even liked If Beale Street Could Talk more so. And the way it takes this pre-existing work and it messes with the timeline a little bit over here. It messes with the timeline in just a really remarkable way that never really confuses the audience but keeps the pace moving really well. Since it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, I think I would lock it down for Best Adapted Screenplay. As kind of like a
Isn't it also
Constellation
one of
Prize.
Spike Lee's first nominations for Black Klansman?
He was nominated for Do the Right Thing for screenplay, not for Best Picture.
But this is like he hasn't gotten many nominations
Right.
since then, and he's got one for
An honorary
screenplay. Yeah, and an honorary Oscar as well.
Where are you guys, if you had to choose of the 5?
I'm going to be honest, I didn't see any of them. So I would say just based on the fact that A Star is Born has been done so many times in so many different ways, and this one got a nomination. I don't know if the other ones were ever nominated, but I didn't realize how much it had been done before this. Like, to me, I thought it was like a new story. So I think there's something to be said for that they've done it in a way that makes it new and fresh, and they used talent like Lady Gaga to really bring it somewhere else. So I don't know if it's gonna win. I would like it to, but I think it's really interesting.
I could see you one day singing that the song at the very end, I'll Never Love Again, because she's got a great voice, by the way. If you ever listen to her sing and all that, she could probably do that song.
This one?
Thank you.
No problem.
Bite me.
It's a tearjerker song. If you have seen the movie, believe me, have Kleenex with you.
I do like making people cry.
I thought it had a happy ending.
So Keith, can we put you down for a table for A Star is Born?
I would say so, yes. Yes. For the aforementioned reasons, certainly.
I'm going with If Beale Street Could Talk. It was sort of a non-linear way that they did the movie, and the story is about a man who was accused of raping another woman, but falsely accused. And the entire time, it's the impending birth of his first child while he's behind prison, and his soon-to-be mother-in-law, is trying to find the woman who basically accused him of this crime and trying to set him free. And they tell it from so many different points of view, from the policeman's point of view, from the couple's point of view, from the mother's. It's really a fresh movie. And Barry Jenkins, if you've seen Moonlight, if you like Moonlight, then definitely go see If Beale Street Could Talk. If you have an opportunity to see it, it's definitely up your alley.
For sure.
All right. Now the next category, we're going to get into the actors. The Best Supporting Actor. The nominees are Mahershala Ali for Green Book, Adam Driver for Black Klansman, Sam Elliott for The First Time Ever for A Star Is Born, Richard E. Grant for Can You Ever Forgive Me, and Sam Rockwell for Vice. You have the last two winners in this category. Mm-hmm. Will somebody win other than them?
It's a nice race because I like all of the actors. I think Mahershala Ali. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to talk?
No. Why does everyone keep doing that to me?
Mahershala Ali, obviously, he's one of the best actors of his generation. Sam Elliott finally getting nominated after all these years. Richard E. Grant, this character actor that I knew from like BBC stuff, but a lot of people don't know, and now he's kind of thrown into this light, and he's loving it. If you follow him on Twitter, every nomination that comes out, he posts like this. He's like tearing up. It's like it makes you feel good. Sam Rockwell, he's one of my all-time favorite actors, but I feel like his role in Vice was too small. It was kind of like a glorified cameo. I love him. I loved his performance. He's really he's already played George Bush in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so that was just prep for this. But I don't think he's got it here. I say Mahershala Ali.
I would, except it was such a recent win for him, so I'm going to go with Sam Elliott.
Ooh.
Okay.
And you know what? Sam was great in that film. He was definitely up his alley as the brother of Jackson Maine. But how about you, Charlie?
Well, I'm mad that Jonathan Pryce didn't get nominated because he was amazing in The Wife.
Ooh.
I mean, probably Best Actor nomination, but so I'm annoyed about that. This one's hard to call. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Mahershala Ali got it, even though he just got it before, because the Academy sometimes likes doing something like that.
They do.
Just to show, we can do things that are kooky and strange. But I would love to see Sam Elliott get it, just for fun. And he's got such a great voice.
Love his speaking voice.
And where are you going with Melanie?
I just love Sam Rockwell. He can do no wrong in my eyes.
And he's great in the part too.
I believe it. Yeah. Again, I haven't seen it.
I like the scene where he's just eating barbecue ribs and like, you know what? I think you'd be just like a great candidate.
Well, I think it takes a lot, like especially. He is a very comedic actor. You can go too far in the comedic vein with it, but I feel like he knows how to just ride that line between like reality and comedy, and I feel like that's something really skilled, and I think that deserves an award. I just love him, and I think he's great.
I think Mahershala Ali ultimately is going to win as Dr. Don Shirley, who's at the epicenter of the film. He's the world-renowned concert pianist and expert in linguistics, and, of course, how to speak properly.